I've read 25 books so far in 2024, and so I'm gonna do a wrap up of all the books I've read. I read 8 romance books, 8 fantasy books, 3 mystery/thriller books, 4 fiction books, and 2 historical fiction books. Okay, the first book I read this year was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This was a mystery book. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was pretty good. It was hard for me to get into at first, but after like the first 100 pages, it really picked up and I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars. The second book I read was Magic Hour by Kristen Hanna. Kristen Hanna is one of my favorite authors. I love The Nightingale by her and The Great Alone. I really like this one. I gave this one 4 stars too. And then the next book I read was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. I thought it was not as good as the first 2. The first 2 books I gave 5 stars, and I gave this one a 4 star. I just kind of got tired of the story after a while, and I probably won't finish the rest of the series. But this one was 4 stars. It was pretty good. So the next book I read was on my Kindle, and I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and it was a romance, and it was such a cute book. I loved it so much. The story was so sweet. It made me tear up at parts. I really loved that one, and I gave that one 4 stars too. And then this book I read, All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which is probably now my favorite book of all time. I loved it so much. I would give it 10 stars, 6 stars if I could. I just thought his writing was so beautiful. It was almost poetic, and I never wanted to put it down. And I just love this book so much. This one was really good. I loved it. I loved it. If I would recommend anyone to read a book, it's this one. And then I read, again on my Kindle, One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It was a good book. I probably wouldn't recommend it to people. I gave this one 3 stars. It was honestly so sad and really hard it was kind of hard to get through, to have to watch the characters go through that turmoil, and so that one was not my favorite book. And then also on my Kindle I read The House Across the Lake, which was also a thriller. I thought that one was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. It was pretty suspenseful and like kept me engaged the whole time, but there was like some paranormal or like magical elements to it at the end that like played into the mystery, and I didn't like that part as much. And then I also on my Kindle I read Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. It was entertaining to see their different experiences and feelings throughout the book and their interactions with each other. And then I read The Summer of Broken Rules by K.L. Walther. This one was a sweet little summer romance, and I thought it was really cute, but it didn't have that much depth and wasn't that engaging for me, and so I gave this one 3 stars. And then back to my Kindle, I read The Women by Kristen Hanna. And again, Kristen Hanna is one of my favorite authors. That was such a beautiful book and so emotional. And so I gave that one 5 stars too. Also on my Kindle, I read Powerless by Lauren Roberts. And that was also a fantasy. And I really liked that one. I couldn't put that one down either. And then also on my Kindle, I read Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. That one was also a romance and very sweet. It was such a beautiful story, and I gave that one 4 stars. And then I read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. They're the first 2 books in the Throne of Glass series, and I love these so much. I couldn't put them down the entire time I was reading them. They were so entertaining, and I loved the whole world that's built through these series, and I gave these 2 both 5 stars. I read them one right after another and literally could not put them down. And then I read Funny Story by Emily Henry. This was probably one of my most anticipated books to come out in 2024. I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it so much. I love Emily Henry's writing. I thought her writing in this book was so beautiful. She has such a way with words. I also love the characters, and the book made me laugh, it made me smile. It was such an entertaining read. And then after Funny Story, I read Real Americans by Rachel Khong, and I liked this book. I thought it was also a literary fiction book, and it follows 3 different points of view, I believe. And it's a really cool story about generations and kind of discovering their culture and relationships with other people. I liked the book, and I felt like being split up into 3 different point of views had a really great premise, and the writing style was really interesting. Like, I thought that the writing style changed with each point of view a little bit, which made it really cool to read. But I just thought she didn't execute it as well as it could have been, so I gave this one 4 stars, but it was still a great book. Then I read The Assassin's Blade, which is the prequel to Throne of Glass, and people typically read this one 3rd in the series, so that's what I did. I like this one. It was cool to see the background of the characters and what came before that first book, because a lot of what happened in this book was alluded to in the first 2. It wasn't as engaging or captivating as the first 2, so I gave this one 4 stars, but it was still super good and entertaining. Okay, and then back to my Kindle, I read Heir of Fire, which was technically the 3rd book in the Throne of Glass series, but I read it 4th after Assassin's Blade. I thought that one was really good. I liked how there were a bunch of different point of views that you were following, not just the main characters, and so you got to see like all different parts of the story. It was a little slow at times, so I gave that one a 4 stars, but it was still really good. And then I read The 5-Star Weekend by Ellen Hilderbrand, which was really good. And then I read The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren on my Kindle. That one was okay. It was a romance, and so it was pretty good, but I just didn't really feel connected to the characters. It was good, it just didn't blow me away or anything, so I gave that one 3 stars. And then on my Kindle, again, I read Betting on You by Lynn Painter, and that book was also a romance, and it was a really cute book. That one was also a 4 star for me. And then on my Kindle, I read Powerful, which was the novella that comes after Powerless that I read earlier in the year, and I loved this novella so much. I didn't want to read it at first because it takes place at the same time as the first book did, and it follows a different character. It follows the main character's best friend and her romance, and because it happens at the same time, like in the same timeline as the first book, you already know what happens at the end because it happens at the end of the first book, and it's this really big event. Even though I knew it was coming and it was just a short little novella, I loved it so much. I loved the romance between the 2 characters and the way the ending was described. Even though I had read that ending before in a different point of view, I cried so hard. It made me so sad. It was such a beautiful ending, and even knowing that it was gonna happen didn't change it for me, and so I gave that one 5 stars. I loved it so much. So in the same series, Lauren Roberts just came out with Reckless, and so this is the 2nd book because Powerful was a novella. I didn't love this book. I had really high hopes for the book because I liked the first 2, or the first and then the novella so much, but it kind of felt like it was kind of lacking a lot of plot the whole time, and the only part that I really liked that I think is worth reading this book if you're invested in the series is the ending, because the ending was so good, and I know the 3rd book is supposed to come out I think April 2025, so I'm happy I read it so that I could get the ending a twist at the ending, and then I'm prepared for the next book, but it kind of was not amazing the whole time. So I gave this one a 3. And last but not least, we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. As we know by me reading Funny Story, I really like Emily Henry's writing. I think she's such a beautiful writer and has such a way with words. And this was a reread for me. I read it for the first time in 2022, but I really wanted to reread it because it had been so long, and I just loved it so much more the second time. The first time I read it, I gave it 4 stars, and this time I gave it 3. I love the characters so much. The story was beautiful. It was so good. I thought it was so sweet, and I loved it so much. That concludes my 25 books of 2024 so far. My goal this year on Goodreads was to hit 26, and so of all of 2024. So I'm pretty close. 25 books out of 26 for 2024. So I'm gonna hit my goal, obviously, so we'll see how many books I get to for the rest of the year. But if you're interested in hearing more about books and what books I like, to see how many more books I read for the rest of the year, you should definitely follow along, subscribe, smash that like button, drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscribe.